as an artist, you get to put headphones on and dive into a world and get into a flow state. And there's a lot of joy in that. And that's the part I do miss about being an artist. And that doesn't happen when you're running a business. You don't get to shut off and put on headphones and disappear. I heard a good analogy the other day, or I guess definition of the difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur, because they have a lot of similarities, right? They both have a lot of freedom. You can make really good money doing both. So if money's the factor, honestly, go freelance. Freelance is the faster route to money. Entrepreneur, you are the last one paid for a very, very long time. But the difference is a freelancer gets paid to work. And an entrepreneur, and their job is to do the work. An entrepreneur's job is to find someone to do the work and to try to make money from it. And you're constantly finding someone to do the next job that pops up. And if you sit down to do the job, you just lost the race of entrepreneurship. I've fallen into that pit so many times.
Hello and welcome to the Art Department podcast. We're at episode 27 and we have another interview lined up. So it's me, Urschel here in Singapore. We have in San Francisco, Emmanuel Shiu, and in Los Angeles, we have here Max Berman, the co-founder and one of the chief people behind the service Kitbash 3D. And today we want to talk a little bit about where he came from, what he's currently doing, and what he's up to in the future. So actually, I met Max the first time in Croatia, out of all places, at an event where we're both speaking. And I was actually sitting next to him in a dark cinema listening to somebody else's talk, and I had no idea he was sitting next to me. And until somebody pointed it out. And then over the years, we stayed in contact. And I think when we met, it was actually not too long before you started Kitbash, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll get to that. So first of all, big welcome to Max here on the podcast. And why don't you give us a little bit about your background for those of you who don't know Kitbash, who don't know Max Berman?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. And I love that moment in Croatia when, because we had known each other's work, I think, and someone pointed you out. That's Jan? And like we both had this moment, we've been sitting next to each other for the last hour, like, oh snap.
Exactly.
Yeah, that I'll give you the 2-minute version. Unless you want the longer one, but we can start there.
Let's start with the short one and go from there.
From LA, I was a matte painter in the film and video game industry for about a decade.
Wow.
Then became an art director, and then left the industry and became an entrepreneur.
Wow, that's the 10-second version. Wow, where did
How long were you a matte painter?
Go ahead.
For 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
I remember you did some work on Far Cry and I guess some other Ubisoft titles maybe as well.
Yeah, I did. I mean, games-wise, I was on Far Cry Primal, Far Cry 5, and then what are the Ubisoft? I did League of Legends, Call of Duty, Titanfall, Halo.
Okay, so a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
How did you? I mean, how did you first of all get into the industry? Was matte painting the main thing you wanted to do from the get-go, or?
Yeah, matte painting was definitely, that's where I wanted to be. And I cold called every studio. I went down the phone book at the time.
Wow.
They had the numbers for every studio. And so there were 200 of them in LA. I called them all. And the very last one, Zoic with a Z, was the one that said, yeah, come on in for an interview.
Nice.
So yeah, I got my start there as an intern, worked under Sid Dutton, who is a legendary oil and glass matte painter. And he took me on as his apprentice, learned a lot from him, and then kind of started my career from there.
Wow. And the art direction part, was that also in a studio, or did you kind of decide to do your own thing at that point already?
Yeah, I owned a VFX studio for a little bit, and
Wow.
then did not know anything about business. It did not go well. And then I became art director at Elastic, where I was art
Okay.
director for opening titles. So I did The Crown and Westworld.
Oh, nice. Oh, Westworld, I think that's what a lot of people know. The opening sequence, I assume. And
Yeah.
nice. And so I can already see some very early like entrepreneur spirit there, trying to open your own VFX studio with nothing much more to go on than your creative juices. That's
Turns
interesting.
out that's
So
not
so
enough.
it's not like you said like, hey, I need to do Kitbash, and then it was like a runaway success. So there was some stuff that happened before.
Yes. Actually, I have a quick question. Uh, I mean, we're basing a little bit more, this talk on, to sort of, business and, like how all this stuff is happening. How did that first, VFX job, like, how did that pave the way? Like you said, it didn't go well. I mean, can you elaborate a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Starting a VFX studio was kind of my first attempt at trying to control my own destiny and be able to have that freedom of not being beholden to a boss or a studio's hours or how things, in retrospect, freelance probably would have been a much easier solution to that. But I also wanted to build something bigger than me. And so I started off this studio. I had a business partner who was a producer at a studio. I knew nothing about business, and I made probably every mistake in the book. I think we got a cease and desist for cracked software licenses in our first week. Didn't even make it past the first week. We did a ton of projects there. I mean, we did Game of Thrones there. That was when E-Man and I first got to collaborate unknowingly. He had done concepts, and then my studio, I was doing the matte paintings, and my studio was doing the compositing for it. But yeah, we started that studio, worked my ass off, nonstop, 7 days a week, constantly trying to like bring in work, execute a good chunk of the work myself. I didn't know how to lead a team well. I didn't know how to delegate, how to hire, and I knew nothing about business. We thought that we had a little office space in Burbank, which is kind of far away from most of the other studios. So we thought it was our location. That was why it was so hard, which it wasn't. And so we built a brand new studio, literally put all the money we made on all these projects into a new studio, built the thing out. On the day we're walking through, the first day where we actually get to walk through our new studio, my business partner basically was like, I don't want to run this studio anymore. So just, yeah. So, and it wasn't no fault to him. We had been grinding our asses off and it had not been going well. We had projects, we did good work, but financially we weren't anywhere close to being sustainable. So we closed down the studio. I made sure every artist who was working there got a job at whatever studio they wanted to, and joined Elastic as an art director. And while I was there, I spent, just about every waking moment trying to understand why didn't it work. I had put so much myself into this business and thinking like, what could I have done better? Why is that not working? And so I started reading about business. I started listening to every podcast you could, every YouTube video, and started to move from business, starting to learn what's marketing, what's sales, what does a profitability even mean, or margins, and started to realize like, hey, it's not that, I mean, yes, I didn't know how to run this studio, but also a VFX studio is not a great business.
No, it's not.
It's very hard to operate a VFX studio and make money from it. And so that kind of like led me on this path of thinking what else is out there and starting to have this interest and curiosity about what makes businesses work and what doesn't. So yeah, it was not a good first at bat, but I don't regret any moment of it because it was one of the best learning experiences.
Because it sounds like, it's a very positive thing now that you look back at it. But how did you feel? I mean,
Utter
did you
failure.
feel like completely defeated? I mean, how did you feel?
Completely. When you give a project, I mean, not even a project, a studio, you give it everything you have. We're talking about like all of your savings into it, all of your time. You make so many sacrifices to get this off the ground, to build a brand, to build a team, and it doesn't work. It's 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 a feeling of failure, but also it's almost confusion. You're like, how? And it was, but I think that's where the lessons come. Those hardest moments when you're at your very bottom is when I think if you can look at it from the lens of what can I learn here and how do I not repeat this, I think there's the most valuable lessons there.
For sure.
That's a great lesson to learn, and almost it's really hard to come out of it, being as positive, drive. So you were at the art directing job trying to figure out business, continue from there. What?
Yeah, well, the second part about starting a studio that's really hard when it doesn't work out is going back from being the owner of a VFX studio to being an employee at another studio. A very difficult task.
Yeah.
When you're hearing like, hey, you got to be here at 9 a.m. on the dot. You're like, what? Why? Like you're so used to like I used to set the rules and now I'm abiding by someone else's. Needless, I worked with a very talented team there, but I don't think I was capable of going back to working for someone else. And so after a little bit of time there and a couple projects, I realized I just needed to take a sabbatical and just get away, figure out what the hell I'm going to do with my life. And at that point, 10 years in the industry, I felt like I had tried every job. I'd been an artist, been a lead, been a supervisor, been an art director, owned a studio. I tried all of those and none of them quite fit me. So I didn't think there was much more to explore in the visual effects world. So I kind of just took a break, started doing personal artwork, and figured, I'll figure this out. Let me just give myself this time.
It's a smart thing to do.
Yeah. Keep going to Kitbash?
Well, So then at that point, you're, obviously you're not digging basically you're doing somebody else's work. You're being told you have to do all this stuff. And I can just imagine how that feels, because I wouldn't want that. So you're taking the sabbatical. So what did you find out in the sabbatical?
Yeah, well, a couple things happened. I started making a video game that was more of like, this is a personal project with me and a childhood friend. That started to, a friend who I grew up with, we always said when we were kids, one day we're going to make a game. And this game was like the perfect game to make with each other. And it was small, and I just started working on that and having a lot of fun with that. I made a Learn Squared course and put that out. And that was the first time I had ever seen passive income of like, I'm getting a check every quarter. This is awesome. And I thought, wow, like that, I bet this game could do the same thing. Like if we put this game out, maybe it would just cover, who cares, 2 to 3 months of rent a year. I'd be set, I'd be happy with that, and have the course cover another 2 or 3, and maybe take a couple freelance matte paintings, and that covers the rest. Really like paring down to like, what's the minimum I need to make in order to have the freedom that I want. And then Banks and I had been good friends for years, but we had lost touch, and we reconnected, and I showed him this video game, and I thought, I'm about to go to publishers to try to find someone to publish this game. Maybe that's something we could do together. Maybe we could start a publishing company. We knew nothing about publishing, but Banks,
back to that whole thing.
But he has a long history in working in advertising and marketing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He's spent a decade doing that. And so I thought, well, a big part of publishing is the marketing side. I bet with his marketing expertise, we might be able to like figure something else out here. And at that point, we had both been studying business for a long time, or for me, 2 years at that point of just like hardcore studying business every day. And so we started Fuzzy, which is our publishing company, shortly after we partnered with Nintendo to put the game out.
Wow.
That was a 1.5 year long journey of press tours and doing crazy events and like doing them with no money. And like, you know, we'd go fly into a city, we'd go to Best Buy, we'd buy everything we needed to do this big game booth event. We'd set up the whole event, and then the next 2 days later, we'd pack everything up and return it in Best Buy, and then fly out of the city. It was like we called it our Best Buy rentals. And then we were doing that everywhere, like Targets too, where you're like, here's a rug that 20,000 people have stepped on for the last 2 days. We're going to try to figure out if we can return this because we can't pay for this.
That's funny.
Wow.
I had a question though, you know, and this is interesting to me, where how did you learn how to make a game? I mean, you just say you made a game, but man, did you already know, or did you have to learn it, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of YouTube videos.
So you made a game in like
Unreal.
Unreal, okay.
YouTube videos can only get you so far with that. Luckily, my childhood friend who I made this with is a very talented programmer also. So
okay, that helps.
Not also, he's the talented programmer. I'd go in there and program things and screw them all up, and then he'd go and fix them all and do a bunch more. And but it was a lot of just learning on the fly and playing with things.
Wow.
So where did that leave you? I mean, sorry to cut in.
Go.
Where did that leave you at the end? Did you feel like, wow, I wanna make the next game? I don't know if you work on anything right now, or did you feel like, okay, I made a game now. It's okay, but it's not. I figured out that this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, what was this new experience, and where did it kind of bring you?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, when we were making the game, we were supposed to go to E3. We were coming to the Nintendo Switch, so we had a Switch with the game ready to like show some people and press. And Banks and I are walking in, and they announced right as we walked through the doors that there was a new Mario game coming out on the same day. We were like, well, we're gonna get crushed. Like, there's no way. So we like turned. We didn't even go any more steps into E3. We turned around and walked right out. We're sitting at a cafe, and we're like, well, we just tried to bring in a couple people to help with the marketing of this. Are we just gonna let them go because we have to wait a year? And we had to wait a year because the whole fall AAA season had been starting, and that was the last week before AAA season. And so I had this idea for Kitbash, and I pitched it to him in the cafe, and we said, well, yeah, let's see if we could build that and release that instead, and maybe it'll make enough money to hold us over until this game comes out. And that was really the only intention of like, can we make Kitbash, and can it, you know, generate something to keep our team here? And then, you know, a year later, the game came out, and like Kitbash made a lot more in that month than the game did. And it was a much bigger team at that point, and it had become a company. And, you know, the game came out, and we were really excited about it, but it was like this other thing, it has a life of its own already, and it's growing up super fast and kind of needs our attention if we want to like actually make this what we think it could be. So we put the game out. I don't know if I'll ever make another, maybe one day make another game. I mean, Fuzzy is still alive. We have a lot of projects with Fuzzy.
Nice.
And those projects just have really long timelines. So like things we started working on, you know, when the game came out aren't going to be out or announced for another year or two. So it's just longer timelines, but it's such a small part of our focus. Kitbash is something that we're really passionate about and building.
Right. I mean, I think people have the wrong idea of what, like, I mean, of course they can say Kitbash is okay. It's about like 3D assets that you can buy and everything. But I think people have not a clear idea about how big the company actually is. Like how big is it now? How many employees do you have?
We're 50 people right now.
That's quite crazy. I was quite surprised when we talked about that, and you mentioned you have so many people that it takes really that many people that are involved in various aspects of running such a big business, and that's quite impressive. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, obviously, right? But it must have been quite an endeavor. So, I mean, what do you like? How are you involved in the day-to-day business actually in running Kitbash? I mean, I assume there's like artists, like 3D artists, people in marketing, probably people, I don't know, you have maybe an accounting team, legal, whatever. I have no idea. I mean, but what do you do? How has your role evolved over from being like, let's say, an art director to now running this big business? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because I think especially a lot of artists kind of look at my job and go, what do you actually do each day? And so Banks and I are co-CEOs.
Okay.
It's being a CEO it's the hardest job I've ever had. It's the most rewarding. It's the hardest. I don't know how people do it alone. I don't know how that's possible. Okay. Yeah. We divide and conquer really well, because it takes so much. I think maybe the best analogy is when you're on a client call as an artist and you're talking to a client, and so you have to have your client face on, and then you jump to a painting, and now you have to switch to your artistic brain. And then maybe you get a bunch of emails and you have to quickly respond with some logistical thing of scheduling. And then you have to jump back to the painting. The mindset shift is a lot. It's hard to get back into the painting. It takes a couple minutes before you can get back into the flow of it. And if you're shifting like that all day long, every half hour, it's really difficult. That's really what my job is to be the translation between all of these different moving pieces of this, and to make sure that we're all aligned in where we're going and how to get there, which is very different. I don't work actually that much at all with the artists at Kitbash. I wish I did. Right. But we have an amazing head of 3D who runs that team. We have amazing concept artists and modelers and textures. I'm pretty close involved with the R&D and the pipeline teams, but that's just where I like to spend my time, so I try to give more time to that. But every day I'm either on a call with the finance team, the marketing team, our head of 3D, getting the update, looking at schedules, looking at how much more resources do we need to give these different departments, what are the challenges they're facing. So yeah, it's a lot of meetings and jumping between different types of subjects.
That's crazy.
So I got a question here. Do you miss doing art, and do you still do art?
I won't say that I miss it.
Interesting.
I'll do 1 or 2 paintings a year, and just so I don't
good enough.
Those paintings remind me why I don't want to do art anymore.
Man,
it's
okay.
I mean, business,
emotionally, business is easier because there's an objective way of saying, did you accomplish it or did you not? Art is so subjective that as artists, we beat ourselves up all the time, and we go through the valley of suck, and we don't know if we're worthy. And like that emotional turmoil is the thing that like, at least I experience every time I do a painting, and the thing I don't miss.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for me, what's interesting to know about is, so, I mean, you have, looking back, you transition quite a bit into different roles. You were like an artist, and you chose to be an art director or like a supervisor, and then you kind of like headed a studio, and then, I mean, Kitbash was not 50 people strong, like when you founded it or in the first year or whatever, right? So in the beginning, you had to be involved a lot more directly with actually the artist, I assume. And then over time it evolved like, oh shit, we have to hire a head of 3D. We have to hire a head of a head of this, a head of that, right? And then in a way, your job evolves. And I'm always wondering, like, how, like, did you feel like you always had to give up a piece of something, like you had to give up a certain job that you actually enjoyed doing, and you were moving towards the job you have now that maybe some parts of it you don't really enjoy doing, or did you actually feel like you are going in the direction that you actually want to go to, and you were happy to leave these other jobs that you had to do but didn't necessarily want to, like you could leave them behind, if you know what I mean? Like, do you feel like you're getting further away from where you want to be, or like you're getting closer to what you really feel like you ought to be doing?
I think every day I'm getting closer. It was hard at first. Delegating is hard, right? When you think you're really good at something and you bring someone else to do it, and there's ramp up time. So like, it takes someone time to learn how to do these things. And so the first little bit, you're like, I just want to hold your hand through this. And you got to kind of let that go, because yes, it may release at 80% of where it would have if you were doing it, but you're going to be able to do that so many more times. The output is going to be increased. I mean, when we started, I thought I was going to do every cover for every kit we put out. And Banks was like, we cannot scale that way if you spend 2 weeks a month doing a cover. Right. And I thought, we're going to do Kitbash, and I'm going to do a personal painting for 2 weeks a month, and that'll be the cover. And I was like, but I mean, who else are we going to get to do a cover? And Eman was the first one that Banks brought up. It did the first cover that wasn't mine. And he was like, do you think Eman would want to do a cover? And I was like, I don't know, but if he would, that would be amazing. And he did an amazing job on the Warzone cover. And then it was like, oh, wait, there's other artists here who would want to do covers for this thing. And, you did Neo Tokyo 2, which was amazing and way better than any cover I could have ever made. You kind of realize once you let go that, like, there's a lot of people out there who are a lot more capable. And
than yourself. Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, I don't know about more capable. I would say that it allows variety. But I mean, I guess for me, I'm really curious, like that day at E3 when you're at the cafe, why Kitbash? Why? Like, what was the reasoning behind, like, hey, let's just make kits? I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, I hated using 3D. I hated it because I would get projects where I'd have, a couple days to turn around a painting. And if I was going to model and texture something, that would take me the whole time. I'm slow in 3D, to be honest. And I thought, like, this is so dumb. Like, I've done hundreds of castle paintings. Can't someone just model a couple pieces of a castle that I can use? And I thought, if I'm having that problem, I bet you a lot of other people are having that problem. And even if no one buys this, at least I'll be able to recoup my costs because I'll use it and be making money off of map paintings.
And so did you look around and say, well, I mean, okay, there are sort of, there are places that have, places you can buy certain models and stuff. I mean, what made you think, hey, this, we could, do packs and this could be, I mean, you guys were the, early adopters, really, I think, of this whole Kitbash kind of trend. What did you look at your competition and say, well, we're different, or was there anything? How did you see that? I didn't
see competition at the time. I saw, there's Turbo Squid and CG Trader, but you find one asset and you try to find a second one in the same style, and you can't. It was too unreliable for when I was using. I'd use pieces. I still do. Like, I think they're great for what they do. And if you want to find like a Audi S5, go to Turbo Squid. You're going to have someone who built it, and maybe you have to try a couple of them, but you'll find it. And we're never going to build an Audi S5. That's, first of all, we own all the work we create, which means everything's an original design, which means there's no copyright behind it. So we can't do an Audi S5. Turbo Squid can. They're going to do a great job at it. But there wasn't the cohesive style, and there wasn't the, like, consistent quality level and level of detail.
Was the focus on architectural stuff, which I think to 95% you still stick to? Was that I guess that came really from you being a matte painter, I guess, or was there another reason behind saying like, oh, we want to focus on that particular thing instead of vehicles or washing machines or plants or whatever?
Yeah, well, I think Megascans does a great job with plants.
Oh yeah,
And
of course,
I don't think we need to, if someone else is doing it, then the problem's already solved. And I think we can spend our time solving problems that no one else is tackling.
Right.
I think, a lot of people have said, why don't you do characters? Characters are so personal to a story or a game or an IP. It's hard for us to do a bunch of characters that would be anything special. And I think environments don't have that same stigma because an environment can be set, dressed, and changed around, and you don't need to rebuild New York every single time. You just need it once, and you can customize it. So I think it kind of works better in this model for environments and props. We tried vehicles. I screwed up vehicles. That was I misread how people wanted to use vehicles. And just wasn't clear on that. So we put supercars and tanks and drones out there. That's something we still need to do and still want to get right. We did it once, we missed. We're going to do it again and do it right.
Interesting. I wasn't going to even talk about it, whether it's good or not. But that's an interesting that you say that from yourself. So the next thing I wanted to ask is I lost my train of thought. It's okay. I'm going to cut it out.
Well, let me ask a quick question first, because I actually want to ask, like, what's the most popular thing that today, what's the most popular kit that sells, like I'm curious.
Yeah, when we launched the store, first of all, you said we didn't start with 50. We started with 3 in a garage, and the 3 of us took bets on what kit was going to sell the most on launch day. We launched with 4 kits, and so Gothic, Deco, Middle East, and Neo Tokyo. No one betted on Neo Tokyo. We all took the other 3. We can't dethrone it. It doesn't matter what we put out. Neo Tokyo still is like the thing that is most used on social media. It's the thing that most of the studios want. Most artists are picking up. So that's the most popular kit, and it's been since our launch.
It's also one of my favorites. Yeah, it's interesting because once you start having a library, you really get an idea of what it is actually like to. Because I think this kind of sales distribution of what sells and how well and over time, and with having a back catalog and everything, then I guess it's the same for any kind of company. The same way that Apple's products sell, or Samsung's phone with having 10 different models or whatever. There's always going to be one that is outselling everything else. I know it from my tutorials now that I have 20 or whatever. I can see that there's some that I just always sell, and it's not the ones I would have necessarily bet on them, but they outsell everything else, and I'm like, just why? And then I guess it's the same for you guys to say okay, we're doing this set, and I'm pretty sure it will sell well, because just based on maybe past data, you feel okay, this kind of set should really sell well, and then it doesn't. Maybe I don't know if that's the same for you, but so my question would be how do you approach the design of new sets? Do you always go to do a lot of market analysis and say this must be selling well, or is it just hey, I had this cool idea, I just saw this image on Google, I thought this would be nice to do? Do you go with your gut, or is it a calculated decision? I don't know.
It's both. We listen to the community a ton. We send out email surveys. We have a thing on our website where anyone can suggest a kit. Social media, especially when people are guessing on hints of new kits, we look at that. So we have a massive list of requests that we've gotten. They're kind of grouped together by genres. And then we as a team have our own ideas. Our concept artists and modelers a lot of times have their ideas. And we kind of lay it all out, and we'll do like a kit idea days where we just generate hundreds of ideas of kits, and we kind of pare them down and segment them. But I think that, what you're talking about the course, and with us, it's the same thing. If we were to double down only on what the bestseller was, we would ruin it.
Yeah.
We would ruin it. And so we can't do that. We can't only create Tokyo cities.
Right.
As
Yeah,
much as I would love to, we can't.
Yeah.
And so I think what we have to do is find a balance and say, not every kit we put out in a year is going to be a home run. And there are some things that we know are more utilitarian and more necessary, that like generic things that people need but aren't as flashy.
Right.
There's sci-fi stuff which people are always really excited about. And then there's like the off-the-wall ideas where you're like, I don't know if this is going to land at all, but our team is so excited about it. And it's something new and fresh that we have to do it. Because I think if the team's excited about it, they're going to do an amazing job at it. And if they're excited, I think other people will be too.
That's true.
Because we put out heavy metal last year.
Right.
Off the wall kit, very strange. Everyone was really passionate about it, getting really creative about it. But we were like, there's no data. Like, who's going to want this? What's the practical application of this kit?
Yeah.
I could not tell you.
What does heavy metal even mean? Yeah.
It did really well.
Oh, really? That's nice.
The work people created with it is super creative and amazing. And it was kind of a testament to like, it's worth it to make sure we do still pursue those ideas too.
I mean, one of the things I always look at is like how, like, because I have to make a decision if I want to buy a new set as a professional, right? I have to say like, okay, I'm charging this to the client, and I need to see like, do I want to build all the assets, or do I actually have room in my budget for buying a new Kitbash set? Is it going to help me save time? But often I ask myself like, is the asset generic enough that I can pop it in the background, or is it like so nicely designed, or it's so unique that it is on the verge of overtaking what I'm actually paid to design itself? Like, how do you approach to walk this line between I don't even know what to call it, between like having it just be like an extra or it being the main actor? How do you approach that?
I mean, you're right. It's kind of the like blessing and the curse of like, if we design something iconic, people will really like it, and we'll be able to see where it's used. So we'll know that it's being used. But then it becomes hard to hide, or it might take the attention away from the rest of the environment. So, I mean, that's something we've definitely wrestled with. And this year, I think we're making a pretty strong effort to do a lot more utility kits of like, there are certain things that everyone needs that are nondescript, that there isn't that many packs for. So we're doing a lot more of that. So, I mean, I wrestle with that too, because I want us to design the coolest looking things we can. But at the end of the day, like, Kitbash is a tool, it's a utility. Right. It's meant there to help the artist achieve what they're trying to achieve. The only thing I can say is I hope that they're modular enough where customizing these pieces, they're giving you interesting shape language that makes it easier to create something interesting. Because if it was just rectangular buildings, it would be hard to create something unique or interesting or beautiful.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know about that though. I mean, this is where I got to come in and say, because I remember one time having this discussion with George Hull, and I was saying, he was, this was a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, and I was kind of poo-pooing the whole Kitbash. I'm like, just throwing shit together and throwing pieces together and he's like, oh, okay. Because I'm saying, well, George is like, well, I'm really not using a whole lot of different parts. And I'm like, and I'm just, I'm not being an ass, but I was just kind of going, really? I mean, is that real design? And then he gave me, he basically put me in my place. And he just basically, because at that time he was my mentor too, and he would say to me, well, why don't you try to make something from these parts that I've made this thing out of? Like, if you think you can do that and it doesn't take any skill at all, then go ahead and try that. And I did, and I was like, okay, I see what you know, because a lot of that is really a lot of years of skill to recognize when you actually have some shapes that are unique in silhouettes. You're just using, you're using pre-made things, but in different, proportions, and you see different amounts of it. And it really made me see the benefit of Kitbash and how you can use it to design, because even a lot of the old model makers were Kitbashing stuff, on your favorite ships. And obviously there are people like Sid Mead and that won't, that have, a certain amount of their own design language already incorporated. But I saw what he was saying was that, like, it's not everybody that can just take something and kitbash it and make it look right. So it's going to take a lot of the skill of the person doing it. But nowadays, I mean, I don't think I've made a model. I don't know how long it's been. I mean, even my last piece, with this dragon in the lab, I'm like, everything is like
Taken
either I
from
bought
somewhere,
something or taken from somewhere, and then I put a whole bunch of stuff together where it didn't you can't really tell where it came from. But I have no qualms about buying kits anymore, because I'm like, just bill it to my client. I mean, just bill it to work, because it's saving me 4 days of building.
Yeah, that's exactly true, right? I mean, there's a couple of different things here. So, I think your kits are being used by a wide variety of people. You have just people in architecture, you have people just matte painters and just graphic artists, and also concept artists, right? And I guess the kits are all being used in very different ways. That some people use it really directly as like, oh, it's a cityscape, but some other people who are just looking for shapes and interesting greebles and don't want to necessarily do everything yourself, they're going to turn your Neo Tokyo set into a space station, right? And that will involve a lot more skill, like you said before, with recognizing different shapes and reusing it. But one question would be, like, how do you deal with all these people kind of almost generating your marketing art for you, and you cannot control what they're going to upload and how, like, when they're going to tag you and with what? I mean, there's going to be some good ones, and then there's going to be a whole lot of not so good art that is done by people who maybe illegally downloaded or pirated your stuff somewhere, but they still think it's cool to tag you. Like, how do you deal with all of that as a company?
I think, our company mission is to enable and inspire artists.
Right.
And if people are creating, and they're creating, regardless of where they're at in their own artistic journey, the idea that they're using our tools to create something, or that maybe having a kit gave them an excuse or a reason to go create a piece of artwork that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise, that's the ultimate reward. It's, the skill level of where they're at in their journey, that's temporary. They're going to post and they're going to get better and better, and hopefully we can make that journey a little easier on them. So I love seeing all levels of people do it.
Cool. Do you think, though, trying to get into not a more serious, but maybe a bit more controversial topic of, like, there are a lot of voices out there, a lot of artists that, for some of them, it's obvious that you use Kitbash. It's like, okay, this is the only way to go. It makes a lot of sense. Actually, we have been Kitbashing since, like, we had little model kits that we could buy. And there are famous examples of the Millennium Falcon being stuck in the Blade Runner cityscape and all these kind of things. So for a lot of professionals, it's completely nonsensical to even have this discussion. But there are also other voices and high-profile voices who say that kitbashing is not helping art. It's the end of times or whatever. We're all gonna burn in hell. I don't know, when we use kitbash, and I mean, the same has been said before about photo bashing and everything. But I mean, I have my own opinion on that, and I mean, I use it all the time because it makes sense. But I mean, what would your reply be to somebody saying like kitbashing is the devil's work or whatever? I don't know.
Man, I think that's the first time I've heard kitbashing is the devil's work.
That's how
too harsh. Too harsh. Yeah, I go to the extreme.
I mean, like everyone has their own relationship with art. There are a couple different reasons that people use kitbash, I think. If you're a professional, your job is to give the client what they're looking to do as quickly as possible and deliver at the highest quality. How you get there, completely irrelevant. You know, that the client is not going to ask you, how did you make this? And if they did and you said, I grabbed a bunch of models and I bashed them together and I got a cool image for you and I got it done in a day, they're going to be like, awesome. Do we have licenses? If you are a student and you're learning, the goal is to iterate as many times as possible and to focus on the thing that you want to be doing the most. If that's modeling, then you should spend your time modeling. And if that's creating images that tell stories, then why are you going to go and spend your time learning modeling and UVing and texturing and shading? Good to know if you get into a bind, but to put the amount of effort and energy into mastering that skill the way that our modelers do at Kitbash, I mean, our team loves modeling and they're the best in the world at it. Like, I've worked at a lot of studios. This is one of the finest team of 3D artists I've ever worked with. Our concept designers are the same way. They are masters in environmental storytelling. And we're just starting to unleash that kind of thing where, you know, a lot of the new kits coming out this year just have little stories ingrained into every little detail. Those are the types of things that will give you an edge as an artist to give it more life and detail faster and let you focus on an actual composition or an animation or whatever storytelling aspect you want.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think it's easy.
Wait, hold on. What is your standpoint? You never shared it.
You're putting him on the spot here.
My standpoint.
No, Jan.
Oh, my standpoint. Oh, sorry. Right. No. I mean,
it's the devil's work.
Yeah, it's the devil's work. Like burn you to stake. No. It's. I think it is. I thought I was torn on this, but I'm actually very clearly for using Kitbash because I try to use. I don't want to call them shortcuts, but the more work I do, the less time I want to spend on stuff that is just. That eats up my time. The thing is, right, I realized that I easily go into those areas of like painting textures or building something in 3D because it's like a similar, I feel like a similar kind of work to like going around with a lasso in Photoshop and cutting out things. It's time consuming, but you don't have to think. You just do it, and then time suddenly 1 hour passes, and you have cut out like 50 persons from a background. If you could have just bought a pack for $5 on some website, I think I always took the easy way out of like, I can just build this myself, right? And then it's gonna take me 2 days, and I have shoddily modeled something, but I could keep my brain occupied, and it was. I didn't have to think about the bigger picture. I didn't have to make any important decisions. It was kind of just like deferring like the decision making and the responsibility to a later point because I could just make the excuse of like, I have to build this first. Instead of just buying the thing that looks better anyway and then getting right to the decision making at that point. So that's what I felt always like in the earlier stages of my career, like, oh, I needed to do that. Otherwise, it's not mine, right? There was also that feeling like, oh, it's not like I can do it better. Like it has to be my design. When you have to really admit, I mean, that you're not the best. You can't be the best at everything, right? And I mean, I understand some people who make a case against it, but in those cases, the environment is actually not secondary to the storytelling. Like the environment is the storytelling, and from that point, I can understand that you really have to spend the time on creating a absolutely 100% unique environment. And in those cases, I think kitbashing is not the way to go, right? I mean, you're not saying that you have to, like, the only way to go is to use kitbash because, right? It's not, there are projects that where it makes sense. And especially in live action, I think it does make a lot of sense. And, but in other areas, it doesn't, right? So that's where you have to draw the line. And to say that kitbashing is not art, then yeah, I don't want to even get involved in any kind of discussion of that level, to be honest.
Well, I think it also depends on what kind of an artist are you, you know, because I think for some artists they work better putting things together and almost like a Lego set and getting inspired, like, oh my God, look at that. Okay, now I can make something original from that silhouette because I never even thought that possible. And there's other people who are like Sid Mead who already have a good idea and he can draw it out, and that's how he likes to work. And I think it just depends on who you are. But I mean, like a painter, most likely is not going to mix their own pigments. They're not going to do any of that. They're going to buy something that's available. And sometimes, you know, they'll mix stuff and okay. And then, or a photographer, you know, you're not going to build the set every time. Sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. And I think in the end, it's whatever works, you know, for you. The only problem that I actually have is when people are making art and it looks exactly like the Kitbash set. That's when I'm kind of like, well, do something with it, you know, because then it's just you're not, you know, you're just seriously just making a render of it. And then people are trying to go get jobs and saying, well, you know, look at my work, and half, you know, like 80% of that image, why it looks so good is because the models are really good. And all you got to do is shine a sunlight in there. And you know, all of a sudden you got a matte painting, and a lot of times, to me, that's not being creative with the sets.
Yeah, when we started doing this, one of the things that surprised us, we thought Kitbash was going to be mostly for studios. And then we realized that, wait, there's a lot of hobbyists and individuals in the world who have never used 3D who really want to. But the learning curve for 3D is ridiculous. Like, I don't know when the last time you guys learned a new 3D software is, but like,
I'm learning.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I hope to avoid that. And because of that, I stick with my like old software that I'm comfortable in, but like, I know there's better stuff out there. I just don't want to go through the process. But when you think of someone who's never touched 3D and they open up that interface and they see the bajillion icons and buttons, it's so overwhelming, and the amount of time it takes to actually get something that looks good, you'll lose interest too fast. And
True.
I think if we can close that feedback loop, we can make it faster to get your first render that looks good, that looks promising, that gets you excited, then you're more likely to go do that second one.
Right.
Oh, that's a good,
As a professional, you should be creative and be mixing this up. As a student, I think getting your first render could be a big milestone.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
True.
That's absolutely true. What is next for Kitbash? I mean, you know, this, you know, we talked about your whole thing and the game, you know, sort of it's, you know, it is what it is, and you may or may not make another one. Looks like Kitbash is like far and away like the main gig now. Is it, you know, what's next for it? I mean, are you planning a lot bigger things? I mean, are you going to grow it into a bigger place, or are you happy where it's at?
I mean, we're not slowing down for sure. We're speeding up, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because Banks and I both, when we started, said we never wanted to run a company with more than 20 people. We're like, anything beyond that would just be too big. And then we were like, well, once we got to 20, we're like, well, we would never want to run a company more than 50 people. And now we're like, well, we'd never want to run a company more than 100 people. But the truth is, the scale is just to match the ambitions of what we want to accomplish and what we think we can do. There are projects we're doing now that we couldn't do without the team we had in place. Right. This year, I mean, we're ramping up across the board. We've been releasing 1 kit a month since we launched. This is the first year we're releasing 2 kits a month.
Wow.
So doubled the output. While doubling the output, I mean, the product team's gotten a lot bigger and a lot more of a robust pipeline now. So like the quality will go through the roof. So we're scaling all of the actual kits, trying to make better kits, trying to make more kits. And then, beyond that, that's so much of my focus is product and development and R&D. Banks is really the mastermind behind our customer experience and our marketing and how we're cultivating community. And I know he has a ton of things planned for that this year to go way bigger than what we did last year. And then I think for us, our goal is to enable and inspire artists. It's not to make assets. Assets is just one thing that we do in order to accomplish that goal. I think this year we'll start to take some bigger steps outside of assets as well to make it faster and easier for artists to create.
Wow. There's a lot of stuff planned then. I mean, because you kind of, Kitbash 3D really started, I feel like, not a new industry, but a new type of business. I mean, Megascans is also there, or companies like Megascans, but they do a different thing, right? They do a slightly different thing. But I've noticed there's a lot of maybe individuals or even smaller companies who, I don't even want to say they piggyback on the success of Kitbash 3D, but they suddenly see that there's a market and it is something they could also profit from, right? I mean, how do you see the emerging field of, I don't know, companies or individuals that want to do assets, or, I mean, even if it's like similarly entertainment focused, and because there's a lot of people who do characters with photogrammetry and different kind of sci-fi assets and other stuff, or sculpted stuff that's all aimed at the entertainment, the artist in the entertainment field. Like, how do you see the entire field evolving, and what is Kitbash's place in that new world really that you started?
And that's, I feel like you're going to regret asking that question.
Oh my God.
I'm going to go very high level with it.
That's fine.
I think this idea of the metaverse, right? A fully interactive, immersive world that's digital. It's it's in so many sci-fi novels and movies and books, and this thing that we keep saying is it's coming. It's just over that hill, and we get over a hill and it's still not there. And we're like, well, it's just over that hill, and we try to get to it, and it doesn't feel like we're closing the gap here. And we've been talking about this thing for a long time, but it doesn't seem like we're any closer now than we were 10 years ago. And so when we say, well, where is this going? I think where it has the potential to go is to the metaverse, where we have a fully connected 3-dimensional internet. I don't think that's a given of where it's going. I think that requires a lot of people to push the ball towards it. Mm-hmm. And there's not nearly enough people pushing that ball forward yet, which is why when I see other people servicing this space, I think, awesome. We need an army. and other people building assets, if that's how you want to go about it, awesome. If you want to build tools, if you want to run challenges, if you want to do podcasts that help this community like your guys' podcast does, awesome. That is getting more and more people pushing towards this, because ultimately the thing that is going to make the metaverse happen, the same way the internet sprung up. The internet sprung up when anyone could build a website. The metaverse will happen when anyone can build a world. And so if we can make that easier and get more people to do that, then we can get closer to that reality.
Wow, that's high level. Okay, that's interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. But it's an interesting point. I mean, everybody's building all this stuff, right? Where does it end up? That's a really good question. And maybe it will be all that, and we're all going to be running around in Kitbash buildings, right, with our VR headsets on and everything. That's very cool.
Actually, I have one question that I remember from when Max was talking about how his day, a lot of this stuff would be jumping around from things to different things to different things, and I know that a lot of people that have listened to the podcast ask a lot about sort of how do you do day-to-days and how do you get back in your flow, and do you do anything special, like block out time for yourself, or however you do it to structure your day so that you're the most productive, or how to recover from jumping around from different things? Do you have any things that you do that help you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I always love hearing people's answers to this. Some people fall on the chaotic spectrum or the extreme order spectrum. Jan, I have a feeling which one you are. Everything I do is really circled around how do I perform the best at my job, because outside of my relationship with my parents, my girlfriend, my friends, that's number one important thing to me. Number two is my job and what I'm trying to accomplish and give to the world. So everything's structured around that, and the only way I can do it is with extreme structure. I need schedule, I need regiment. The more I can regiment things, the less decisions I have to make outside of Kitbash decisions. And so to the point of every day I have a focus of the day. My meetings are at the same times every day, even though there'll be different meetings at the same times every day, and each one has their own focus. So Monday will be operations, Tuesday will be product, Wednesday will be marketing. My mornings is like here's where I get a lid on what's going on in that department. My afternoons are here's my work time on a specific project with one of those departments. So that helps with the mindset shifting. At least I know that hey, this block of time, I can just focus on this part of it. I read constantly and try to not be looking at a screen before bed. Try to get 8 hours of sleep, try to work out, try to eat healthy. All of that in the name of, can I be at my peak performance during my workday?
Right.
Yeah, no, that's he's a structure guy.
Yeah, you need that. I think if you want to pull this off successfully, you have to. I mean, one question I would have before we wrap things up, I think, is so I'm sure that a lot of artists, including myself, are always like, okay, so I've been an artist for a while. What comes next? Like, am I cut out to run a company? Can I really do this? And there's a lot of doubts, of course, in embarking on such an very how to say, like a very intimidating endeavor as yours. But was there anything you felt like in your personal character where you said I'm made to be a CEO? I've always wanted to do things this way, or I always felt like I wanted to be independent. I always had certain things. I always did things a certain way that later I realized were actually preparing me for doing this job that I'm doing now? Like, is there anything that you would be able to recommend people to foster or whatever when they feel like, oh, I'm not quite happy just being an artist?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was my deep-rooted issues with authority.
Okay.
I think that it's a very big decision, because as an artist, you get to put headphones on and dive into a world and get into a flow state. And there's a lot of joy in that. And that's the part I do miss about being an artist. And that doesn't happen when you're running a business. You don't get to shut off and put on headphones and disappear. I heard a good analogy the other day, or I guess definition of the difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur, because they have a lot of similarities, right? They both have a lot of freedom. You can make really good money doing both. So if money's the factor, honestly, go freelance. Freelance is the faster route to money. Entrepreneur, you are the last one paid for a very, very long time. But the difference is a freelancer gets paid to work, and an entrepreneur, and their job is to do the work. An entrepreneur's job is to find someone to do the work and to try to make money from it. And you're constantly finding someone to do the next job that pops up. And if you sit down to do the job, you just lost the race of entrepreneurship. I've fallen into that pit so many times. So I don't think running a business is for everyone. If an artist thinks like maybe there's something more I can do here, that doesn't mean that running a business is the solution to it. Honestly, if you are not interested in business, if you're not interested in sales and logistics and operations and marketing, do not run a business. You should be a freelancer. If the reason you want to run a business is because you want more creative control or more creative freedom, be a freelancer. If you want to create a company because you want to cultivate a creative environment and you're willing to sacrifice your own artistic desires in order to do that, and you're willing to go and learn all these other things in order to do that, then maybe you should go start a studio.
That's a good.
That's great.
That's, I think.
No, I like that.
Words to the wise. Yeah, that's really very clear cut and very honest and straightforward. And I think that's really what a lot of people should listen to. I think that's very, very good. Emmanuel, was there any last things you wanted to?
No, just what are your social media handles? Anything you want people to know about upcoming, whatever, anything. Now's the time.
I rarely post anymore at Maxx Burman VFX, but you'll rarely find anything there. At Kitbash 3D is the best place to see what we're up to. And
for everybody, go check out Kitbash 3D if you don't already. I'm pretty sure everybody knows about it, but if not, go check it out. We've actually covered it in one of our assets videos.
Exactly.
So saw your guys' glowing review. Much appreciated.
We did not get paid for that. We didn't get paid by Max to do this podcast, right? This is purely because we think Max has a lot of interesting things to say, and I think everybody who listened throughout the last hour realized that he's very open to share all the information, all the wealth of knowledge he has amassed throughout his career so far. That he's not afraid to share everything. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing really all this very valuable knowledge, because I'm very sure that when you started Kitbash, you didn't have this kind of podcast to help you launch an asset company based on selling creativity and assets and all sorts of stuff to fall back on. So for everybody who I think wants to get into, not necessarily what Kitbash, don't launch Kitbash 4D, please. You might get into trouble. But for anybody, I think, who has any kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I think this is a very inspiring words to hear, and I hope you guys got a lot out of it. I did for sure. And so we want to wrap the episode up here. Thanks again to Max for coming on, taking time out of his incredibly busy CEO schedule to talk to everyone here. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. We put all the Kitbash links for you in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you guys next time. Bye.